Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 film Blackout, and I'm just going to tell you right now, this is probably the best movie released this year that people are not watching. Trust me on this one, it's very good. Now, part of that may be where I've been headspace. I could see this film being one where people don't like it as much if you're in a different headspace, but be open to it. I highly recommend this film. Right now, it is the best horror film I've seen this year that was released this year, and I really encourage people to check it out. This one was written and directed by Larry Fessenden, who is a stalwart of the horror community. He's done some other films that people may know, like Habit, Wendigo, No Telling, and Depraved, just to name a few. So he has this tendency to go for these older stories. Like Depraved, I know, is like a Frankenstein's monster type thing, and Habit is like a vampire thing. Well, Blackout is a werewolf thing. So he goes for these very old stories that have kind of been beaten to death, but he puts his own unique spin on them, and Blackout is no exception. It has its own unique story that it's trying to tell while using a very old story. And it works. It works so well. If you think that you're just tired of like werewolf films all being very similar, this is not that film. It is something different, and it is something special, in my opinion. Everyone needs to see this. It's very cheap. I rented it through Fandango at Home, which, it used to be Vudu. They're rebranding it. It's now just Fandango at Home. $7.41 with tax for a rental. Come on. Very easy. Digital rental, very cheap. So quick synopsis. It's basically about a guy who is going through the experience of lycanthropy. And there is a question in the beginning, like, what is going on? Like with a lot of werewolf films, like, is he actually a werewolf or is he not a werewolf? And those types, even if it's the person's not a werewolf, it still qualifies as a werewolf film. I'm not saying either way with this film, but at some point earlier on, you do get an answer as to whether the individual is or is not actually a werewolf. So there's plenty of film where you already know what the situation is. That doesn't change anything about the film. It's still very interesting. So basically, it's about him kind of going around within his town, and this is not too long after his father's passed away, and kind of just falling apart life-wise. And so I'm going to leave it at that. And he has interactions with all these people in the community. So there's a lot of characters that end up popping up in it. But I'm going to talk more to the whole, like, why he's kind of just walking around and not doing a lot, but interacting with a lot of people. But that'll be at the very end, because that's when I'm going to talk about the themes with the film. So if people want to drop out at that point because they view that as kind of spoilery, because I won't tell you the events of the film. But if people find that kind of spoilery, then you'll have that warning so you can drop out. But the acting in the opening scene is rough. But what actually happens in the opening scene does grab your attention. It is quite interesting. Now, that said, it's a mixed bag acting-wise. There are some of the small characters who the acting is not great, but the more important characters, I think they do a good job. And some of them do a great job. Right now, I actually want to really call out Alex Hurt. Yes, the son of William Hurt. He plays the main character in this, Charlie, and his acting is just very interesting to me. I love the way, I don't know if it's fully how he chose to play the character, or if it's partially how it was written, or it was a lot of direction from Larry Fessenden, but the way he plays this character is very endearing. It's very charismatic, very charming to me, and I just loved what he did with that character. So, also Barbara Crampton is in it. So, I'm always excited to see Barbara Crampton. She doesn't have a huge role in it, but I get very psyched when I see Barbara Crampton, because I like her a lot. I love her acting style, and it's just fun to see what role she's going to be in next. So, early on, it has a bit of a feel like the movie Habit. That's one I had seen for the first time just a few years ago, and very early on in this one, I was like, man, this feels a lot like Habit. Like the pacing of the film, the kind of like meandering aspect of the character, the dialogue felt pretty similar, the overall story structure felt pretty similar, so it oozes Larry Fessenden. Like, this is his film. It feels very familiar if you've seen other stuff of his. I really dig the score. in this film. The composition is excellent. Literally, I went afterwards, after watching the film, to Spotify to see if the soundtrack is on there, and it is. So I was just listening to it when I was done watching the movie because it's such great composition. The other thing is, it doesn't get overdone within the film. They know when to restrain it. Larry Fessenden's really good about that. He does a great job of using silence in certain moments, which I think has a tendency to really increase the gravity of situations and just force audiences to sit there and try and figure out how they're supposed to be feeling, or just feel their own particular way about a certain scene without grabbing them by the hand or bashing them over the head with a score that's screaming. So, score wonderful with this film. I'm a big fan. There are too many scenes with shaky handheld camera work early on. I think it kind of cleans up a little bit after that. Very small thing, so it's not something that plagues the film constantly, but in the beginning I was kind of like, this is an overly shaky scene, and I'm not a big fan of that, but it does kind of clean up as the film goes on. There are some really interesting shots that they end up using, so cinematography is really nice. Plus, there's a lot of cool imagery, and some of the creative things for scenes that they choose to do, very cool. There's one involving someone looking into a rearview mirror, which I thought was a really cool thing. And then there's another one that involves animation that looks like paintings that actually ties into the main character to tell like a small story within the story. And that was really cool and creative, and just a lot of those like flashes of sheer inspiration that just like come through the screen to you and speak like, this is a cool, creative, like well thought out film that has something to say. And you can tell so much passion went into the script and went into the making of the film. So, but that's Larry Fessenden from what I understand. There are a lot of characters in this, and most are pretty interesting in one way or another. That's the other thing, is a lot of the times with these types of films, when you throw in a lot of characters, you can end up with writing that makes all the characters feel very similar. And that's not the case with this. Every single character, even if they're like a very small character, have their own personality. They have their own way that they're talking, and they feel like their own person, and they are interesting in one way or another, whether it has to do with their diction, how they're speaking, or what they're saying, or how they're interacting with people, things like that. So there's some really good dialogue. So going to that next logical point, the dialogue is very well written. There's some really impactful dialogue that ends up getting used in this, and I think that's one of the things that really pulled me into the movie and the experience of immersing myself in it. Also, like I was saying my headspace, but the ending is quite good, and it makes an argument for being a better person to some degree. A lot of films have that type of thing in there about, like, the moral of the story is, and if it's something you consider and take to heart, it can make you a better person. So it does that. But the ending is quite good. I thought it had really good payoff for what it was. It was an hour and 47 minutes long with credits, which is kind of long. It probably could have been cut down some. But honestly, the nature of the story and how it felt, and knowing like that was kind of what Fessenden was going for, like it felt like that's what he was going for, it still worked for me. And I wasn't mad at that runtime, honestly. I actually honestly could have gone with more, because I was living in this film to some degree. Fessenden really knows how to create scenes with gravity and make you really feel and reflect on what you're experiencing. And that's a combination of the cinematography, the acting, the way the dialogue's written, how the score is, all of those things coming together and just being that perfect moment of having gravity to it, and really giving you those moments of, wow, this is really what this filmmaker's trying to say right now, and that's very impactful. So I got a lot of those really nice, impactful moments from this film. It's so much more than it looks like on the surface. And going to the next thing, there's a persistent underlying sadness to the film that feels like the filmmaker is putting in the film everything that's making them upset in society right at that moment. Kind of speaking a little bit to the themes, and then I'm going to go to the themes after I talk about this, but that sadness, or some people would probably categorize it as just like this melancholy that just oozes throughout the entire film. I like that in film a lot because it keeps you in a certain place. And I think that's achieved largely through the score, but also through how the characters interact with each other, the writing in general, and how the dialogue is structured. So it just, I don't know, it just works really well. And that kind of sadness throughout, I think, works super well for the story and the points that are trying to be made here. And it really does make you feel like it's the filmmaker putting themselves on the screen in certain ways. And I love that. So before I go to the thematic stuff, because I know some people will want to drop off before that, I'm going to give my rating of this film out of 5 stars with half stars in play. This is a 4-star rating for me right now. It is, like I said, this is probably the best movie to come out this year that people aren't really watching, and I would really like that to change. So hit the thumbs up on this so more people see this review and go check that movie out. Go check the movie out yourself. Also, if you want to support me, you can subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell button and all that. So drop off now if you don't want to know the thematic stuff. But for everyone who's sticking around, let's get into it. The film does feel slow and mundane, but it's extremely charming and interesting at the same time. That's not so much, thematic, but bears saying. The movie does deal overtly in racism and uses some current racist attitudes and rhetoric. So it feels very topical, even though, racism has been around forever, and I don't think it will ever go away, unfortunately, but it feels like it's rooted in the racism of now. So there is a large component of that, but that is not all the film is. There's a lot to it. It also deals in family trauma and how the trajectory of someone's life can suffer because of it. It also deals in what happens with a person after they experience things in their life that they're having a hard time dealing with. It goes to depression. It goes to how your actions and not dealing with your own demons can end up impacting not only your life, but other people's lives at the same time. And it can kind of grow out like that into an entire community, basically. And then it feels like once it gets out to the entire community view, it's hard for people then to look at the individuals, and instead they see an entire group. So I think it's also kind of speaking to our societal issues of division, where people are having a tendency to look at a grouping of people, categorize them, and say they are the problem. Every single person I'm placing in this category is the problem. And they're not seeing the individuals within that group. There's a really great quote within this film that this doesn't ruin anything, but there's a great quote within this film where a father is speaking to his daughter, and he says something about, something terrible's happened to this community, and she says, it didn't happen to the community, it happened to me. And I feel like that was such an important piece of dialogue that tells you a lot of what Fessenden's going for here. The core message behind the movie is about division within society and the tendency for people to find scapegoats instead of getting to the core of what's actually wrong. And on top of that, like I was saying, seeing groups of people as inherently bad and not seeing each person as a unique individual like we all are. And then the final thing is, this film actually feels a lot to me like this film that I saw a long time ago, and a lot of it has to do with like the underlying sadness, having a hard time dealing with trauma, depression, all of that type of stuff. And that is the film United States of Leland, if no one's ever seen it. It has a very young Ryan Gosling in it, and Don Cheadle is in it as well. It's a very deeply affecting, very well done film. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But it's, it kind of speaks to a lot of the same things that Blackout does. I know another thing you can look at this film and view it as dealing with alcoholism as well. So like I was saying, there's a lot to this film. There's so many layers to it, and there's so many ways that this film can feel personal to people. It's a phenomenal film. Again, 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's really good. Check it out, everyone. But if you want to comment about it, go ahead and put it in the comments. Even if you didn't like it, don't feel like you're raining on my parade, because I am always open to hearing other people's opinions on the films, and not every film is for everyone. That's just the way it is. And like I said, maybe part of it is that it hit me at a certain time in my life. I'm going through grief right now. because I lost my cat, who's basically my best friend, and it's hard. And this film had a lot of things I could connect with on that level. So I understand that, maybe I'm biased for that reason, but I can't not rate it that way right now, if that makes any sense. But anyway, everyone, thank you for checking this out. Go ahead and put the comments down there. And until next time, keep it brutal.